Okay. Good. I'm waiting for Instagram to connect. Come on, Instagram. Here we go. All right. Hello, and welcome in to another episode of I Don't Know, an agnostic's adventure in subjective reality. My name is Michael Tyler, and I am an actor and woo-woo spiritual guy coming to you live on the internet with my deepest, darkest thoughts on art, current events, and spiritual practice in the context of human history. I gotta revise that intro. It's a little wordy right now. Also, this is the first time that I'm trying to do music and stuff. I'm live producing my own podcast. Was trying to get the intro music right. Here we are. All right. So, what are we talking about today, you might ask? What are we talking about today? Well, first we got to do our intro. And I'm changing the intro up a little bit. The intro is, how are you? How are you doing? How are you feeling? Let's all sit back and take a couple of deep breaths and check in with ourselves. All right, I'm feeling very self-conscious about having done that, but I did it. Now, I've decided that this part of the intro, I'm trying to go about this confidently, like I know what I'm talking about, but I definitely don't. This part of the intro, I just realized that my Instagram and my notes are sharing this. Damn it. Maybe I can fix that real quick. I can. Yes, it's fixed. All right, so I'm going to read a little bit from my little red book that I wrote this morning. I do a morning meditation and a 5-minute free write every morning, and I kind of remember what I wrote, and I thought it was kind of interesting, but I haven't reviewed it. So, well, you're going to get it right inside my head. Observation must be an energy or a force. Okay, so this is because I was thinking about the fact that they have proven that photons behave differently when they're being observed. And it's like, how does a photon know it's being observed? It's a photon. So I was thinking about that, and then I wrote this. Observation must be an energy or a force. Can observation be measured? If photons behave differently when observed, are photons conscious? How do they know they are being observed? Are photons conscious? What? What if bacteria were conscious? What if things that are so much smaller that we don't even consider them, what if they're conscious? How do you define consciousness? I need a smarter person on here to tell me how to define consciousness. All right, let's keep going. Oh, I got a couple people in here, or I did briefly. All right, I have no idea where that would start, but scientifically, we have all had the sense of, is someone watching us? Are my ears burning? It comes from somewhere, right? Okay, so observation is you feel when someone's looking at you, the hair on the back of your neck pops up. My cats always know when I'm looking at them. They're like, man, stop looking at me. We, everyone subjectively, objectively, has probably experienced the thought of oh, I'm being observed. And apparently that goes down to the fucking photon level. So therefore, observation, or maybe attention, has to be some sort of force or energy. Even though it's not measured. Well, I don't know. That's my thought. I'm not a fucking scientist or a philosopher, but What if it's related to quantum entanglement? Like they know that like particles can be linked like across the galaxy. Particles aren't necessarily, the galaxy isn't strictly local. So maybe that has something to do with observation. I don't know. I'm going to pretend. I came up with this morning, so it's not a fully formed philosophy. All right, that's enough of that. I'm going to go into our first break, and on the other side, we're going to get into segment number 2, which I call illogical sanity, and I'm going to be talking about where we are in the world, and I'm describing it. It's not my description as the second Cold War, and I'm going to make some predictions about what happens in the second Cold War in the 2024 election. Because it's election season, baby. It is 2024. There's primaries, there's caucuses. New Hampshire is voting on fucking Tuesday, I think. God, I'm sure I'll have thoughts and feelings about that. So that's that. And our words of woo in segment number 3 will be coming from Mr. John Lennon. So join me after the break. Time this out quite right. Look at how long this. All right. Yeah, I think that's the signal that we're about to come back. Welcome back. We're in segment number 2 of I Don't Know, Agnostic Adventure and Subjective Reality. And now, lasting a lot longer than I thought. But I'm having live. Go practice this. All right, here we go. Now, welcome into segment 2 of I Don't Know, Agnostic's Adventure and Subjective Reality. I'm all tense because I'm on a podcast live on the internet, and I actually wrote out some thoughts. I scripted this a little bit, not scripted. I don't have it scripted, but I've got notes, and I'm trying to be relatively intelligent. Oh God, I hope this isn't terrible. All right, so I know on my last episode, I was very much saying okay, democracy is on the decline, which is maybe true. I mean, I think it's definitely at risk right now. I think it's definitely at risk. But I didn't want to leave on a negative note. I think I definitely still have plenty of hope. I don't want to be out there putting negative energy into the world. I don't want to be fear mongering. I don't want to make people. I don't want to be one of those people that goes to the hysterical worst case scenario. I hate that about our politics right now. I hate that about our news right now. Is everything is so freaking sensationalized and getting the biggest emotional fucking headline that you can, because that's how you keep people tuned in. That's how you keep people watching, is by making them feel real strong feelings. So that's why there's so much fear baiting and anger baiting in our culture war right now. It's not fun. It's not fun to be living in a culture war, I don't think. How many of you, of the 0 live people that I have right now, how many of you have spent way too much of your life arguing with somebody in the comments or on Twitter or wherever, right? Let's turn the temperature down on that, and let's stop being afraid that the world is ending all the time, even though it fucking feels like the world is ending right now, all right? Because there are 2 major wars happening that the US and Russia and China and Iran and some of the major superpowers are either involved in or rubbing right up against. So it feels like World War III is on the edge of coming into existence. It definitely feels like democracy is being threatened. I talked about that in the last episode. What's the other thing that's happening? I feel like there was a third one. I guess that's it. We'll discover it. If there was some third thing that I had that we should all be afraid of. But fear not is the message of this podcast, because I don't think we're coming up to this third world war. I think we are in the second Cold War. And that's not like a phrase I coined. The philosopher, the thinker, I don't know what he is, Neil Ferguson. I listened to an interview with him. I forget where. But he was describing it as the second Cold War. And I like that. I like that a lot. All right, so here we are. It is January 21st, 2024. If you're watching this from the future, if you're watching this from an alien civilization, this is where we're at. Second Cold War. It's the West, quote unquote, versus the East, quote unquote. The West is defined basically as the British Empire extended. All right, it's the U.S. We're the the head of the wedge. But come on, it's basically just like where the British Empire had. Like, what is the West? U.S., U.K., Australia, Canada, yeah, all part of the freaking British Empire. And Europe, not part of the British Empire, but, in the sphere of influence there. So that's the quote unquote West. The East, I'm defining as China, Russia, and Iran, which I don't know if there's like an official, alliance between the three of them, but none of them like the U.S. There's all a little bit of rivalry with the U.S. Iran has hated the United States for a long time. Israel being probably the main point of contention there. Russia obviously has deep feelings about America kicking its ass in the first Cold War. And NATO coming right up to its borders, which can't have made them happy. And China is trying to be the global superpower. China is trying to supplant the United States as the economic superpower and political military superpower. Maybe. We'll see. So there's like a few major heat points that are happening right now. One, in 2024, all right? 2024 is a crazy year. There's elections all over the world. We just had the people of Taiwan had an election, and they elected another person who does not want they don't want to join mainland China. China very much wants Taiwan to join it. We're worried about China like invading Taiwan, or probably not invading Taiwan, blockading Taiwan. All right, it could be like a second Cuban Missile Crisis. I'm going to talk about that later. All right, so that's what's going on in the East. In the East, I don't know. That's what's going on with Taiwan. Taiwan is one hotspot. Now, obviously, what's happening in Israel is another hotspot. Israel has Hamas, a terrorist organization that is also a governmental organization in Palestine. On October 7th, 2023, pulled off just a brutal attack at an Israeli music festival and killed thousands in one day. Just horrible. That's been described as Israel's 9/11. And in response to that, the Israeli government has basically bombed the shit out of Gaza, and it's a humanitarian crisis. It's I can't speak comedically about it because it's just like one of the worst things going right now. What's happening in Gaza? I'm not going to go into that, but that's one of the hot points in hey, maybe it's going to be World War III. Another one that's happening, the U.S. election, right? Probably it's going to be Trump versus Biden. Neither of them, as I talked about on my last episode, are particularly good for democracy. Trump, for obvious reasons, he fucking maybe was part of an insurrection. We can debate that for a little bit, but we won't. That'll be another podcast. But he's clearly been trying to use the power of his own. Well, he's clearly stated that he wants to use the power of the office if he gets reelected to punish people that didn't support him. And like, this is fucking Roman time. Like, this is Roman emperor shit. Biden, on the other hand, not nearly as bad as Donald Trump. I'm definitely not equivocating them, but he's like not like they're like the Democratic Party is not having primaries. They're keeping other people off the bid. They're just like they're blacklisting Representative Dean Phillips, who is an interesting character. Look out for him maybe on January 23rd when the New Hampshire primary happens. So, you know, it's a contentious election. The last election, the results were contested. I'm very much expecting that. Honestly, I can't imagine a scenario where the results of this election are not contested, which could lead to the Second American Civil War. So that'll be fun. Oh, yes. In the comments, Richardson Pictures, the very talented Eric Richardson, mentions that not only that, but Trump will be pardoning himself from the various investigations that are going on. We could talk about the investigations that are going on too. I'll probably have a different podcast about that because there is some, it makes people a little nervous. I understand conservatives being like, hey, you're weaponizing the Justice Department. You're trying to shut your political enemies up, just like Trump promises to do. I mean, it's the whole, ever since we got off on the whole lock her up bullshit, we have basically turned power into threat of jailing your opponents. That shit is crazy. Just any democracy that's trying to jail their opponents is in trouble. Personally, I definitely believe Trump should be found guilty of many of the things that he is being tried for, but I don't really want to see him end up in jail. I think that would be really bad for democracy. I have to flesh my thoughts out fully on that. Hi, Eric. He just sent a waving emoji. See how fun it is to be live on this podcast? You could watch this later. You could listen to it. I hope you do. But join us live. All right, where was I? So those are some of the major hot points in the world. All right. We've got the American election. We've got a war in the Middle East. We've got China really wanting to bring Taiwan back into the fold. We've got instability in Africa. We've got actually, might be a little border war in South America too. What is it? Venezuela and Guyana. Venezuela, the much larger power, is basically saying hey, half of your country, that's our land. And I think they're challenging, is the U.S. going to actually stand up for Guyana? Also, shipping route issues with piracy. Yes, this is going on in the Red Sea, at least right now. The Houthi rebels in Libya are basically attacking ships, so nobody can ship through the Red Sea. So it's taking shipping you can't ship through the Red Sea, so you got to go out the Mediterranean Sea and all the way around the Horn of Africa if you want to ship your stuff, which is not going to be great for the global supply chain. We had so much fun with the global supply chain in 2020 and 21. Let's fuck around with it again. Why not? Hey, Caroline, how's it going? So yeah, not looking like it's going to be 2024 is a fantastic year, but I am a beacon of hope. So yes, democracy feels like it is in peril. And yes, it feels like we're on the edge of World War III. But I'm going to game plan it out with the potential results of the American election. And here's part of the reason I do this. All of these hot points that I've mentioned, I personally have very little control over them. Obviously, I'm going to hi, Caroline. Obviously, I'm going to vote. And I hope you do too. Although interesting, I'd be very interested to talk to some people that think voting is useless or even negative. It's going to be an interesting world we live in, guys, in the next decade or so. But I'm going to vote. But we got a war in the Middle East. We got a war in Europe. I didn't even mention Russia, Ukraine. We've got a potential war in Asia, and we have a cultural civil war happening in the United States. The only part that I can influence at all is the American cultural civil war. And one of my main things is I want to calm down. I want to bring the temperature down, because the more we hate our neighbors, the worse this cultural civil war is going to get, and the closer we're going to get to an actual hot civil war in the United States. But I don't think that's going to happen, because I have faith in humanity. So I'm going to game plan this shit out. It's going to be a rough few years. All right. So if Trump wins the election in 2024, he'll pardon himself. He'll get rid of a bunch of enemies. It won't be fun. It won't be good for American democracy, and cultural tensions in the U.S. will worsen. So the American cultural civil war will probably get worse because he is a flashpoint. All right. So that's going to be terrible. He also is probably not going to support Ukraine. Trump, not really into this whole Ukraine thing. We can go back and forth on whether he's like a compromised Russian asset or whatever. But he does not seem to be in support of America spending billions and billions of dollars defending Ukraine, which, hey, I can understand an argument. Personally, I think it's a battle worth fighting, but it's a lot of fucking resources. So, he probably will not continue funding Ukraine. Which will mean Russia will probably occupy most of eastern Ukraine, basically making it part of a vassal state. Part of a greater Russian empire. Trump, I don't think, will stop Israel from occupying all of Palestine. That's going to bring the tensions between Iran and the U.S. much higher. I think it'll be mostly status quo in the Middle East. Like, I think there won't be a ceasefire. Israel will occupy all of Palestine. It'll be terrible. But ultimately, I don't think Iran jumps over the line and like directly attacks the United States, and I don't think the United States directly attacks Iran. That's like the three scenarios that start World War III are if the U.S. engages directly with Iran, China, or Russia, right? So Trump definitely not going to engage Russia in the Ukraine. Probably will pull support for it. Russia will occupy most of Ukraine. L for the West, okay? Israel will probably occupy all of Palestine, but Iran and the U.S. will probably, keep their hands in their pockets. Not a W for the West, not an L for the West. It's just, unfortunately, more terrible status quo in the Middle East. The big question, I really think what could happen, what could start World War III is if China decides to blockade Taiwan. I don't think it's a parallel that comes from a parallel to the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? The USSR put missiles in Cuba. America blockaded it. We fucking got this close to fucking nuclear weapons being engaged. It was close to the end of humanity. It could have been fun. So similarly, China, if they decide to blockade Taiwan, the United States will have a choice if they want to try to break the blockade. So we could find ourselves in a moment where U.S. ships are racing towards the blockade line, and whoever the American president is and Xi Jinping are, either hopefully talking on the red phone or not at all. Anyway, I think Xi Jinping probably doesn't want to fucking play chicken with Donald Trump. I'll be completely honest with you. Trump is crazy, and I think of any of the people we're going to talk about today, he is the most likely to do something reckless. And I don't think China wants World War III right now. I don't think they are ready to actually, their economy is too deeply tied into ours. So, I think if Trump is elected, the West will lose in Ukraine. It'll stay neutral in the Middle East and China. I do think China probably already is, but will continue to and maybe amplify their I'm going to say psyops in the United States. They'll definitely foment the U.S. cultural civil war because Trump is such a divisive figure. So eventually Trump's going to have to not step down. Any thoughts on China and the power of AI and cyber attacks? I will probably get to that later. But yes. So, and actually just to go right on that, the power of AI, I mean, gosh, it's I think of AI as a tool, right? So it's going to, like if we say unlock AI first out here in the West and use it for cyber warfare, we will have an advantage. But China will also, like, if every major government isn't trying to figure out how to use AI to cyber attack its enemy, they're doing it wrong, because I promise you Russia is doing the same, is doing that. I promise you China is doing that. I promise you Iran is doing that. I promise anyone with a, like, you know, with any sort of access to AI, any government with access to AI is figuring out how to use that with cyber warfare. And so I hope our government is doing that too. So I think that's a very astute observation, Mr. Richardson, that I think China will be using. This part connects with what I was saying earlier. China will be, even though they won't blockade Taiwan, they will be trying to foment the U.S. cultural civil war. They will be cyber attacking us, trying to shut down our networks. And I think it's less likely that you'll see a full-scale like cyber attack on U.S. soil. I would hope that our cyber defenses are strong enough to defend us, but honestly, I'm really not sure. I would not be surprised if there were, like, you know, electricity grids shut down, or power plants shut down, or, you know, banking systems fucked with. Let's try to keep it positive here, guys. So, eventually, Trump's terms will end. I don't think he'll make himself a dictator, but it's possible. He'll probably serve 4 more years, and he'll probably try to basically anoint the next person in his mold. It'll probably be like Vivek Ramaswamy. Basically, I think his goal is to have like some sort of control system like Putin. Although I think he probably won't go for the, like, hey, I'm going to be in power for 24 years. I mean, he's not going to be in power for 24 years because he's fucking 76 years old right now. But I think he'll want to set up his party, which you can call it the Republican Party, you can just call it the MAGA Party. He'll want to set them up to be in power forever and make it so that they can, you know, influence local elections and whatnot. So eventually, he's going to be out of office one way or the other. He'll probably try to set us up with, you know, some sort of, I'm going to call him Republican authoritarianist, or some sort of centrist will come in, and some sort of centrist will come in eventually. I believe that we are going to, snap back. I'm optimistic. I think we're gonna fight for our democracy. I think we're gonna wake up. I think we're at the very beginning of the fucking information age, AI, social media, all these different ways of communication. We're getting we don't understand quite how we're being manipulated right now, but I think we will figure it out. All right. And I don't think it'll be too late when we figure it out. So maybe the next president will be a Republican authoritarianism, but eventually, in 4 or 8 or 10 years, we will find some sort of centrist champion of democracy, and democracy will be saved. I don't know who it's going to be. I would rather have a centrist champion of democracy right now, but that's not what we have. In this scenario, Taiwan will eventually fall to China, and Russia will probably try to expand more, and we will stay at high cultural tensions to see if NATO and Russia actually go to war in Europe. But eventually Taiwan will fall to China. Eventually China will do the blockade. And I think Taiwan's going there. So 2 L's for the West in that scenario. But we'll see. But at least we don't lose democracy entirely. All right, next up. If Joe Biden wins, cultural tensions in the U.S. are going to remain bad. He's not as strong a lightning rod as Trump is, and he's done his best to bring down, you know, the tension like he promised he would in 2020. He is trying kind of to bring down cultural tensions, but right now he's mostly just being anti-Trump. And no matter what happens, this election is probably going to be contested. And if Biden wins, people really fucking hate Biden. So cultural civil war gets worse. I don't know if it gets as worse as it does with Trump, but anyway, it's not going to get better. I think we're still getting the same status quo in the Middle East. I think Israel will occupy all of Palestine. I think Iran and the U.S. tensions will remain very high, but ultimately, I don't think Iran wants to start World War III right now. So I think it kind of just remains the status quo. And Biden, very supportive of Ukraine. He will do everything he can to get Ukraine funding and to keep Russia at bay. And they are probably going to lose some territory in Eastern Europe no matter what at this stage, and Eastern Ukraine no matter what at this stage, which is a bummer. But after that, I think Ukraine will join NATO, which is a nightmare for Russia. It's like then basically NATO is right on the Russian border. I do think China will blockade Taiwan against Biden. I think they think Biden is a weak leader right now because America is very divided and very weak. And I think China will blockade Taiwan. I think Biden probably won't pull the trigger and start World War III. I don't think he will. I hope. But that's going to be a big fat, probably the biggest L for the West you can take, because China will get a lot technologically stronger with control over Taiwan, and economically stronger. Taiwan is the main exporter of some of the most important superconductors in the world. Superconductors, super chips, computer chips. I don't know. I'm not that smart. Don't listen to this for intelligent analysis. I'm going to have to re-up my whiskey here soon. All right, so after Biden, the Democratic Party is going to fall apart, fighting for the power vacuum. It's already falling apart. And the Republican Party is going to be falling apart once Trump disappears. The power vacuum left by Trump and Biden, I think, whether it gives us semiconductor, thank you, Eric, whether it gives us like more than a two-party system or not. Like, this is my optimistic view. My optimistic view is that once Biden and Trump are gone, the Democratic and Republican Party will shatter, and we'll have like 4 or 5 different political parties, and it'll be much better for democracy. Democracy stay strong. Yay, we win democracy. But the West is weakened economically, technologically, and well, they're not really weakened. They lose a little bit in Europe, for sure, but definitely losing Taiwan is going to be huge. So big L there on the second Cold War stage. Now I'm going to give you a third potential scenario. Yes, that's right, everyone. It is not officially Trump versus Biden yet. There are other options. Jesus, that would be amazing. 4 parties. I agree. 4 Perrys. Here is my third option. I don't know if you've heard of him. Well, Nikki Haley is not going to beat Donald Trump, and I don't think Donald Trump is going to end up in jail or be convicted of anything that's going to keep him off the ballot before the 2024 election. I think it's too late for that. Not that we shouldn't try, but I think there is a small chance that Representative Dean Phillips will take the Democratic nomination, either because he does really well in New Hampshire 2 days from now, and he just gains momentum from there, or if Biden bows out for one reason or another, because he's too old, or because Phillips is getting a lot of momentum. Now, you could probably replace Dean Phillips with, Gavin Newsom or whoever. I think Gavin Newsom's definitely running kind of like a shadow campaign, and just in case something happens with Biden. That's what I think the Democrats Party is. The backup plan is. But Dean Phillips coming in, I really like him. Look up some Dean Phillips interviews if you get a chance. I think he's a centrist Democrat. He works across the aisle. I'm not going to stump speech for him right now, but I think he has a chance at bringing the cultural tensions in the U.S. down. All right, the one person that might actually be able to do that, and he wants to do that. He is he's pro-Israel, so we're going to get the status quo in the Middle East no matter what. Israel's going to occupy all of Palestine. U.S.-Iran tensions are going to remain very high. Don't think Third World War is starting there. Russia still going to occupy some of eastern Ukraine, but I think Phillips will he'll try to fund Ukraine just like Biden does, so we'll get the same outcome there. where Ukraine joins NATO, even though Ukraine has lost some territory in the east. And I think China just won't know what to do with Phillips. They won't know him very well. I think Dean Phillips is he's a businessman. He has run a couple major companies. Every time I've heard him speak, he seems very, even keeled, and he might not be the most experienced person, but I would trust him standing in a room with other world leaders. I would, because I think he's a pretty even keeled, like he's had high stakes meetings in the private sector. So I think that China just wouldn't really be able to read him, and they wouldn't blockade Taiwan, and Taiwan would stay with the West. And I do think that Dean Phillips is genuinely committed to democracy, and I do think that with him leading the country, democracy would strengthen. All right, so there it is. Worst case scenario, in my opinion. Trump wins, the West loses Ukraine, and shit stays the same in China, and shit stays the same in the Middle East, and we get closer to the cultural civil war. Maybe we lose democracy for a little bit here in America, but eventually it will come back, because I am an optimist. Eventually there's going to be a Dean Phillips type person that tries to bring democracy back, and I think we will follow that person. And if Biden wins, that's the second. It's the better of the two options, but it's not great. If Biden wins, I think we're going to lose Taiwan. I think we'll kind of get status quo in the Middle East and in Europe, and I think cultural tensions in the U.S. will continue to worsen. But eventually, the temperature will be turned down. The temperature will turn down. The Democratic Party will fall apart. The Republican Party will fall apart, and democracy will win. All right, that's my analysis. I'm going to take a quick break, and then I'm going to come back in segment number 3 with Words of Woo, brought to you by John Lennon. All right, talk to you in a bit. You're welcome. Oh, that's my music. Pause. All right, we're back. It is segment number 3 of I Don't Know, an Agnostic's Adventure in Subjective Reality. And we're into the Words of Woo segment. Guys, I want to end every segment with Words of Woo, some sort of spiritual stuff, because I'm your woo-woo spiritual guy. And the words of woo for today are, there's nowhere you can be that isn't where you're meant to be, from John Lennon. You want me to sing it? I'll sing it. There's nowhere you can be that isn't where you're meant to be. It's easy. All you need is love. Wah, 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 wah. Okay, so this theme of, you are where you're meant to be, it's something that comes across in, I'm not going to say every religion, but it comes across in a lot of religions. So I grew up very Christian. And my favorite verse was Romans 8:28, which is, I'm going to try to quote it out of memory here. And we know that in all things, it works out to, I can't remember exactly what it is. Somebody write it in the comments. But it's a common theme in Christianity. It's a common theme in like woo-woo spiritualism. It's a common thing in a lot of religions where it's, hey, everything is going according to plan. It might suck right now, but something larger and more intelligent is in control. Now, if you're like fully atheist, you might not believe that. And I get it. I understand there doesn't always seem to be a lot of evidence that that everything's going well. I imagine it's very hard to believe that everything is going according to plan if you're living in Gaza right now, or if your family member was raped and killed in the October 7th attacks, or any of the other terrible things that are happening in the world. But it is a common theme across beliefs that there's something bigger and stronger and wiser that's got our back, and that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And I believe that. And do I believe it because it's true? I'm not sure. I believe it because it's more comforting to believe that way. It's more comforting to live my life as though I'm all right. I'm learning the lessons that I'm supposed to learn. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I don't know if it's true or not. Maybe I'm just tricking myself, but life is a little easier when you can fall back on the faith that someone somewhere has got your back. So thanks for tuning in to another episode of I Don't Know, an agnostic's adventure in subjective reality. I don't know when I'm going to do this next. I don't know if or when I'm going to release this as a podcast, but appreciate you guys coming along. Peace and love.